I want to talk to you today about finding hope when life looks hopeless, or as Zig Ziglar might say it, living up, up, up in a down, 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 doobie down, down, down world. In Zig Ziglar's book, he says psychiatrist Alfred Adler said that hope, we're talking about finding hope today, hope is the foundational quality of all change. It also is the great activator. People with hope take action and they realize their dreams. People without hope are often so discouraged they feel incapable of doing anything significant. Good news, hope and help are available, and that's what this book and that's what this video is about today. Somebody once remarked, life is so daily. That's why the subtitle of this book is Daily Hope. Daily hope for the daily grind. The implication is clear. There are so many obstacles to overcome that the daily grind of life has a tendency to be a killer of hope. And we want to talk about how we can find hope when life looks hopeless. Swindoll said, hope is a wonderful, wonderful gift from God. We don't need a better life as much as we need a hope that there will be a better life, a wonderful gift from God, a source of strength and courage in the face of life's harshest trials. When we are trapped in a tunnel of misery, hope points to the light at the end of the tunnel. When we are overworked and exhausted, hope gives us fresh energy. When we are discouraged, hope lifts our spirit. When we are tempted to quit, hope keeps us going. When we lose our way and confusion blurs the destination, hope dulls the edge of the panic. When we struggle with crippling disease or a lingering illness, hope helps us persevere beyond the pain. When we fear the worst, hope brings reminders that God is still in control. There is a throne in heaven and someone is sitting there, as Revelation 4:2 says it. When we must endure the consequences of bad decision, hope fuels our recovery. When we find ourselves unemployed, hope tells us that we still have a future. When we're forced to sit back and wait, boy, I hate waiting and wait and wait, hope gives us the patience to trust. When we feel rejected and abandoned, hope reminds us that we're not alone, that we will make it. When we say our final farewell to someone we love, as I was with a couple of girls this morning, said goodbye to their mom this morning, and when we have that moment in our life, hope in the life beyond will get us through our grief. Put simply, life hurts and dreams fade. Nothing helps like hope. So, how can we find hope in a world that seems so hopeless? Well, Isaiah's world looked hopeless. The NIV Study Bible says about Isaiah's world that he lived during a stormy period marking the expansion of the Assyrian Empire and the decline of Israel. And so I'd like for us for just a minute to set the context of when this was written. My observation is that many people, particularly people who grew up in church, they know something of the stories of the Bible. They know the story of David and Goliath and Daniel in the lion's den and so on. But they don't know the story of the Bible. And so, about once a year in my teaching, we go through, in about 5 minutes, we're going to give you the 30,000 feet overview of the Bible. And here's a graphic I found online that'll help us this week. We start with the creation and fall, and we don't know for sure that in. The conservative view is that happened about 4000 BC, and although there's not complete agreement about that. There are these two theories, the young earth and the old earth theory. But if we go with the more conservative approach, I think the young earth theory, that would put it about 4000 BC, and it's beyond today's scope of teaching to dive into that. Truth be told, once we get beyond Abraham, the dates get a little bit fuzzy. But when we get to Abraham, we get to around 2000 BC. Now, this particular graphic here has it at 1800 BC. And truth be told, when you get back that far, it's a little bit fuzzy. But we're going to put it around 2000. I want to give you two and only two dates to know the whole Old Testament in two dates. And the first one is 2000, and that is who? Who's it? That's Abraham, right? And the next one is 1000, and that is David. This first 1,000 years between Abraham and David, we tend to know this material fairly well. This is the period of the patriarchs. This is the period of Moses. This is the period of the judges. And this is, generally speaking, the period that we are familiar with. And you can see some of the major events in the graphic here. But then we come down to the year 1000, and we have the life of David, and he has a son by the name of Solomon. And after Solomon dies, the kingdom divides into the southern kingdom, Judah, with the capital of Jerusalem, and then the northern kingdom of Israel, with the capital of Samaria. And you can see that it is during this period, kind of the forgotten period, the forgotten 1,000 years of Old Testament history, that Isaiah and all the other prophets, so all the prophets a little later, most of them a little later than this anyway, but you see where Isaiah lived from around 740-ish to 690-ish. Now, while this was going on, there's three other kingdoms that we want to be aware of: the Assyrian kingdom, the Babylonian kingdom, and the Persian kingdom. The Assyrian kingdom conquered Israel in 722 BC. The Babylonian kingdom conquered them and later conquered the southern kingdom of Judah, and that's 722. Sometimes you'll see 723, but along in there, BC. The Persian kingdom conquered them, and these three kingdoms had three different ways of dealing with their enemy. The Assyrians wanted to scatter their enemies to the far corners of the world and take people from the far corners of their world, or at least their world, and put them in Israel. And that's why the people of Samaria became known in the New Testament as these hated mixed breed people. And it goes back to this history right here. The Assyrians were conquered by the Babylonians, and their way of dealing with their conquered people was not to scatter them, but would take kind of the who's who and bring them into exile. And that's why we have the period of the exile with Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego and others who were taken into exile for 70 years. And then the Persians, their idea was to send them back home and try to keep them happy. And that's why they went home in the time of Nehemiah and others. That is the Old Testament in a nutshell. And the point is, this was a difficult time, a hopeless time in which Isaiah lived. A couple of verses that are kind of slice of life during this period of time. And this is actually technically just before the time of Isaiah. And it's in the northern kingdom, not the southern kingdom where Isaiah lived. But we see this kind of slice of life during this broad second 1,000 years, I like to call it. As the king of Israel was passing by the wall, a woman cried to him and said, "Help me, Lord, my Lord, help me, the king." The king replied, "If the Lord does not help you, where can I get help for you? From the threshing floor, from the wine press, where in the world am I going to get help from you?" And then he asked her, what is the matter? And she answered, this woman said to me, "Give me your son so that we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son." And my point in bringing that up is simply that this was a terrible, terrible time to live. This was a hopeless time to live. You may think your world is very hopeless, but what I want you to see is this was an extremely hopeless time in which to live. "So we cooked my son and we ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give me your son so that we may eat him today.' But she had hidden him." What a hopeless situation. We see a similarly hopeless situation in 2 Kings 7, 3 and 4. "Now there were 4 men with leprosy." That's hopeless enough right there. "But at the entrance of the city gate, and they said to each other, 'Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine, it's hopeless there. If we go into the city, it's hopeless and there's a famine there and we'll die. If we stay here, if we just keep doing what we've been doing, well, we're going to die in that case. It's hopeless. So let's go to the camp of the enemy and let's surrender.' And that may look hopeless, but maybe they'll spare us and we'll live. If they kill us, they'll die, but we're going to die anyway. The situation is completely hopeless." And then we fast forward to Isaiah's day, and we read that in the year that King Uzziah died, this was kind of the one bright spot in this overall dark time. "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and exalted, seated on the throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple." R.C. Sproul says about this time when Uzziah died, in spite of the shame of his later years, he was overall a good king until he wasn't, until his later years, it was a time of national mourning. So Isaiah knew about a hopeless time, and so we want to look at from Isaiah's story how to find hope in a hopeless world. And the first thing that we want to do when life is hopeless is remember who God is. This is this is his message to the people of Judah, and it is God's message to us that when life looks hopeless, remember who God is. This is what the Lord says, Israel's King and Redeemer: "The Lord Almighty, I am the first, I am the last. Apart from me, there is no God." And there's a whole lot of things we could deal with here, but we're going to look at this little phrase here, "the Lord Almighty." And if we do a little horizontal word study, and what I mean by a horizontal word study is imagine a stack of Bibles on a shelf. And if we go through those Bibles, we're going to see some insight into this phrase right here, Lord Almighty. The ESV and I believe the King James and others have it, "Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts," the Lord of hosts. The Christian Standard Bible has it, "the Lord of armies." The New Living, "the Lord of heaven's armies." And the Message, "the God of angel armies." Chris Tomlin has a song based on that phrase right there, "the God of angel armies." Quoting R.C. Sproul again, we read, "The king was dead. But when Isaiah entered the temple and he saw another king, the ultimate king, armies were surrounding them, but they saw the God of angel armies, the ultimate king, the one who sat forever on the throne of Judah. Isaiah saw the Lord." In other words, Jesus is not only gentle shepherd, meek and mild. He is that. He is gentle shepherd, meek and mild, but he is also King Jesus. And when life looks hopeless, as it eventually will for you and for me, we need to remember that there is a throne in heaven and someone is sitting there and he is large and in charge and he's got the whole world in his hands and he's got things thoroughly under control. So we want to remember who God is. And then I've got a point B here, and that is we want to remember the alternative. And in this passage, Isaiah gets a little bit sarcastic with his audience. And he says he cuts down the cedars. A man cuts down the cedars, or perhaps took a cypress or an oak. He let it go among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. It's used as fuel for burning. Some of it he takes and he warms himself. He kindles a fire and he bakes some bread. But he also fashions a god and he worships it. He makes an idol and he bows down to it. Half of the wood he burns in the fire, and over it he prepares his meal. He roasts his meat and he eats his fill. He also warms himself and he says, "Ah, I am warm. See the fire?" But from the rest of it, he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it to worship. He prays to it and said, "Save me, you are my God." And Isaiah is saying, this is your alternative. You either believe in the God of angel armies, or do you believe in this ridiculous notion where a man cuts down a tree and he takes a piece of wood and he splits it in half and he takes this piece of this half and he burns it in the fire, and then he takes this half and he carves it into an idol. And Isaiah is saying, how ridiculous. Well, it raises the question, what is our alternative? People today don't do that. People today don't take a piece of wood and take half of it and burn and put in the fireplace and put another half and bow down before it. What is our alternative view of the universe? Because people want to know. People have to know. I read this book years ago. This author talked about the basic needs of man, that we have a need for food and water and clothing and shelter, and that we have just a need to know and understand. And what is the alternate explanation of the universe? If we do not believe in the God of angel armies, what do we believe in? Well, what we believe in, there was once a time where there was nothing. The mainline scientific view of the universe today is that there was once nothing. No time, no matter, no energy, nothing. And then poof, everything suddenly came into existence. And it came into an existence in what scientists called an exactly fine-tuned way. And in fact, I've heard atheists quoted as saying, this idea of the fine-tuning of the universe, Google it, is one of the most compelling reasons to believe in the existence of God. But the alternative theory in our day, in Isaiah's day, the alternative theory was to believe then I'm going to take a block of wood and take half of it and put it in the fire and take the other half and carve it into an idol. In the alternative view, if we don't believe in the God of angels armies today, with the alternative view that science has to offer us today, is there was nothing, no time, no energy, no matter, and suddenly there was everything, and then that everything formed itself into life. In all of the beauty and nature and reproducing life we see came out of sheer chance in time. And as the saying goes, I do not have enough faith. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, to believe in that. So we want to remember who God is. We want to remember what the alternative is. And then you want to remember who you are. But now listen, Jacob, kind of a stand in for the nation of Israel. My servant Israel, whom I have chosen, this is what the Lord says. He who made you, you are a person created in the image of God, who formed you in the womb and who will help you. Do not be afraid, Jacob. My servant, you are my servant, whom I have chosen. Remember these things, Jacob, for you, Israel, you are my servant. Who are you? You are my servant. I have made you. You are my servant, Israel. I will not forget you. And you might say, well, maybe you, but not me. I've been too bad. I've done too many bad things. And Isaiah addresses that and he says, I have swept away. I have swept away your offenses like a cloud, your sins like the morning mist. Return to me, for I have redeemed you. Craig Rochelle says, here's the truth you need to embrace if you're ever going to change. This idea of who God is and who we are, it makes a difference in the real world. If you're ever going to change, you need to remember that you do what you do because of what you think of you. Could you say that more with me? You do what you do because of what you think about you. He was a young church planter, and their church met in a strip center. And one day he was in his office parsing Greek verbs, as pastors loved to do. And all of a sudden, in the outer office, he heard some commotion. And he heard some people yelling, and they said, "Fight, fight, fight!" And so he went outside, and everyone was running outside. And he discovered that strip center that they were in was near a high school, and it was kind of the local place that when the boys got mad at each other, they said, "I'll meet you after class, after school today." Well, this is where they met. And as a young testosterone charged man, Greg Rochelle started running out there, and then he found himself saying, "Wait a second, who am I? Who am I? I'm a pastor. I can't run out there and cheer these young men on and say, 'Fight, fight, fight.' I got to be a peacemaker. I got to be a follower of my Lord, the peacemaker." And when he remembered who he was, it determined what he did. And when life looks hopeless, you want to remember who our God is. He is the God of angel armies, and you want to remember who you are. Third thing we want to remember is that we want to remember our purpose. Remember what you are to do. Sing for joy. What are you to do? Sing for joy, you heavens, and you everything else, you people. For the Lord has done this. Shout aloud, you earth beneath. And I want to say, everybody in it, burst into song, you mountains, you forest, and all you trees. For the Lord has redeemed Jacob. He displays his glory in Israel. Peter said this in a more straightforward way when he says, "Who are you? You are a chosen people. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. You are God's special possession." You are God's special possession. Why? Why did God choose you? Why did he make you to be a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession? This is why, so that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. What is your purpose? That you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. John Piper said, this is the single, all embracing, all transforming reason for being. A passion to enjoy and to display God's supremacy. And John Piper argues that we make much of God. We display God's supremacy by enjoying his presence. We glorify God by enjoying God. To enjoy and display God's supremacy on all things for the joy of all peoples. God created us to live with a single passion to joyfully display his supreme excellence in all spheres of life. The wasted life, name of the book, Don't Waste Your Life. The wasted life is a life without this passion, without this understanding of our purpose in life. God calls us to pray and think and dream and plan and to work, not to be made much of, but to make much of God, to make much of him, to glorify him in every part of our lives. Max Lucado said much the same thing from a different perspective. His kingdom needs you. The poor need you, the lonely need you, the church needs you. The cause of God needs you. Of course, in an absolute sense, God doesn't need you, but he goes on to say you are part of the overall purpose he is working out in everything and everyone. The kingdom needs you to discover and deploy your unique skills. Use it to make much out of God. What is your purpose? To make much out of God. Get the word out. God is with us. We are not alone. There is a God in heaven. There is a throne in heaven, and someone is sitting there. Last point, last thing we remember is remember your future. And if you're thinking rightly, you might be tempted to think, well, I can't remember my future. I can remember my past, but I can't remember my future. But Isaiah said, in one of the most astonishing prophecies. I want to say the second most astonishing prophecy. We'll get to the most astonishing prophecy in just a moment, but the second most astonishing prophecy in all of Scripture is in today's passage. And he's telling us to remember our future. Isaiah 44:28 says, "Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and I will accomplish all that I please. He will say of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt." Of course, at this time, it hadn't been unbuilt. It hadn't been destroyed yet. But he says of Jerusalem, let it be rebuilt. And of the temple, let its foundation be laid. Do you see that amazing prophecy right there? Well, maybe you didn't notice because you didn't know who Cyrus was. And I go back to this timeline that we had a minute ago, and we saw Isaiah living from 740 or ministering from 740 to about 690. And we see Cyrus living 150 years later, and yet he calls him by name in what I call second most astonishing prophecy in all of the Bible. It's so astonishing that many people have assumed that Isaiah could not have predicted this, and they had this whole theory around a second Isaiah, that a group of people who followed Isaiah in Isaiah's footsteps made this prediction. But I think there's another prophecy of Isaiah that points out the fact that God is able to make this kind of prophecy. And this is in Isaiah 53, 1 through 6, where it says, "Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised." Who is Isaiah talking about 700 years before Christ? He was despised and he was rejected by mankind, a man of suffering, familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. Who is that talking about right there? Well, it's talking about King Jesus. And I've got a pastor buddy that tells a story about going down to, I think it's like 6-year-olds, 6-year-old Sunday school class, and he read this passage to these 6-year-old kids, and he asked them, "Who is that talking about?" And these are church kids, but the church kids were able to say, "That is talking about Jesus." And Isaiah wrote it 700 years before Christ. And the point is this: if Isaiah knew that future, Isaiah teaches us that he knows your future. And in your future, Jesus says he's gone to prepare a place for us. And there is a place where there is no more death or mourning or crying or cancer or Alzheimer's or locks or assisted living facilities or death or crying or pain. That is your future. In a time that looks hopeless, remember your future. Remember who God is. Remember what the alternative view is. Remember who you are. Remember what your purpose is. And remember your future. And may God richly bless you as you discuss these truths together.